How'd you get stuck, James? I don't think he wants to talk about it. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. On this episode, we're going to be opening up OEM taillights. If you can remember our last trip to the junkyard, John picked up these taillights to open these up and create the J Spec replicas. If you guys can see the middle part right there, there's a screw that you remove. It is a Phillips. And then usually what I like to do is take out these bulbs so they don't get melted. Alright guys, for the second part, here's my old little oven. So I set it to bake, and my temperature, I put it around 400. So then I wait until everything's ready. In the meantime, I'm gonna bring everything in the kitchen. So these are both the taillights that we're gonna be using. This one has a little bit of overspray, but that can be polished out. They do have debris inside the lens from where water and maybe some sediment got inside. But that can be addressed when they're taken apart. Before I get started working on the taillights, I am going to be putting these gloves on. The taillights have tacky adhesive on it, and when it gets on your hands, it can be very difficult to remove it. So I do recommend you guys to wear gloves when doing this. Alright guys, for the next step, I don't like to fully put the taillights inside. Depending on your oven, some coils may end up real close to the edges, and I have seen these sides boil. So what I'm gonna do is just set it outside on top of, resting on top of the door. I'm just gonna set it like that, leave it for a few minutes, and I'm gonna keep coming back until this top lens is warm to the touch. And then I'm gonna take it off of there and start prying it open. Alright guys, so the taillight has been here for a few minutes now. The outside is warm to the touch. Ooh, see? That's why you wear gloves. So I'm gonna start frying from somewhere. I don't like to start from the top, because if you start from this area right here, this is very sensitive and you can usually tell right away that they've been opened from that spot. Be very careful with these studs. They are very, very hot. Now what I'm doing on the sides is just rotating the flathead sideways. What that does is it somewhat separates both pieces. you get them just hot enough like I did, these two pieces separate fairly easily. I like this method instead of a heat gun, because with a heat gun you can start working on one spot, and by the time you switch to another one, your first spot is already cooling off. When you pry them open too, use a... Don't try to just crack them open real quick. You gotta do it slow and steady, because if you try to do it quick, you'll crack the lens and it'll all be for nothing. If you don't remove this screw when you take them apart, it goes to this reflector. If you don't remove it as you're prying both pieces off, sometimes you can get lucky and it'll snap right here, but other times you won't, and you'll develop a crack in your lens right down the middle right here. Since our lights are a little dirty internally, like you can see some spots right there, I am gonna remove these lenses. The bottom one we're not too concerned with, because that's the one we're gonna replace. It's easier if you just pry away where the mounting tabs are. You can see all the dark stuff in there. One of the good things about removing the top lens is that you now have access to your reflectors, so you can take both of them off and give them a good cleaning before you put everything back together. If you you do notice that this white coating is starting to flake, this is the perfect opportunity to respray it. What I did with my other taillights was I sprayed it with brake clean, and this white paint just dissolves right off, and then masked everything up where your lens goes in. So all this where the adhesive is still, I just covered that up with tape, and I resprayed it with a white ceramic paint that will be able to withstand the temperature of being put back in the oven when we reseal everything. But this coating is still good, so we're gonna leave it as it is. So you know that this one belongs to the right tail light because the right tail light has an R in the center as well. So if you do have both of these off simultaneously and you have parts scattered around, you'll be able to know through that. The adhesive is still tacky, so I'm able to just press these in place. Alright, so this one's pretty much ready to be put back together. I do still need to cut my clear lens that's going to be replacing the bottom piece. So for now I'm going to set this one aside and go work on the other one. Alright guys, for this next part, it's a little tricky. You're probably not going to get it right on the first time. I got it right like on my third time. But what you do is you get your material. What I did was I laid this over it and I traced the outline. And then the easiest way for me without cracking this, because it's very brittle, was to just cut with the grinder. Along the outline, and you could just, the little residue, rip it off. But that was the best method that worked for me. Once I cut my first piece, I got my lens, I mocked it up, took it off, mocked it up, and I kept trimming away at the edges so it'll fit properly. And once I was done with that, what I did was I just flipped it the opposite way, put 2 clamps holding it down, and I just cut it identical to the other piece. That's how I came up with 2 identical pieces. Alright guys, here's the light. And you just drop it in place. This part right here is complete. I don't worry too much about securing the lens in place. When you do put this cover on, it will hold it down. Since these are for John, he didn't really care too much about the pinstriping, so I apologize. I'm not going to go over that. So since we're not going to be adding the pinstriping, that's pretty much going to wrap up these taillights for us. We're gonna do the steps in reverse order. I'm gonna go turn my oven back on. I'm gonna set this right above it and just let it heat up again. Once it gets warm to the touch, I'm gonna start compressing both pieces together slowly. If it's not enough, put it back in the oven in the same spot and keep doing it until it's fully seated. Alright guys, so just a fair warning, when you're done with everything, you may end up with this. The inside is fine, but we're still stuck with this, so yeah, you're on your own. Well, well, that sucked.